Root beer was once sold as medicine. Then, the government banned its main ingredient for being toxic. Then a pharmacist renamed it beer on purpose, just to trick coal miners into drinking it. And the whole thing started because of a honeymoon. This is not the boring soda you think it is. This is one of the strangest product origin stories in American history, and it's been sitting in your fridge the entire time. Let's go all the way back to the forests of colonial America, because that's where this gets weird. Long before there was a bottle, a can, or a logo, there was a tree, sassafras. A tall, fragrant tree native to the eastern United States, with roots that smell like a mix of citrus, cinnamon, and something almost sweet enough to eat raw. Indigenous peoples across the eastern woodlands, the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Timucua, and many others had been using this tree for centuries before any European ever set foot on the continent. They dried the leaves and used them to thicken stews. They boiled the roots into teas believed to ease fevers, calm upset stomachs, treat skin conditions, and generally act as an all-purpose tonic. This wasn't a party drink, this was medicine cabinet material, and here's the twist that a lot of people don't know. When European explorers arrived, sassafras wasn't just some minor curiosity. It became a genuine commodity. In the late 1500s, English explorer Francis Drake reportedly sailed home with a ship loaded with sassafras root, and it sparked an actual craze back in England. For a while, sassafras was almost as valuable, pound for pound, as tobacco. People were crossing an ocean for tree bark. Now here's where things get interesting. European colonists arrived with their own centuries-old brewing tradition, something called small beer. This wasn't beer for getting drunk, it was a low-alcohol beverage, usually around 1 to 2%, that people drank constantly because, frankly, the water wasn't always safe. Boiling and fermenting killed off the nasty stuff, so small beer was less a party drink and more a survival tool. When colonists saw indigenous communities using sassafras, sarsaparilla, wintergreen, and other local roots and barks for health purposes, they did what colonists tended to do. They borrowed the idea and folded it into their own brewing traditions. They started tossing sassafras root, birch bark, ginger, juniper, dandelion root, and a dozen other ingredients into their small beer recipes, fermenting the whole mixture with yeast in wooden barrels. The result was a mildly alcoholic, slightly fizzy, herbal brew, and colonists, in a moment of stunning creative genius, decided to call it root beer. Not the most poetic name in history, but it stuck. And this wasn't some fringe drink either. Root beer was popular enough that Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and Thomas Jefferson were all known to drink it. Imagine the founding fathers sipping root beer between debates about the future of a nation. That image alone should tell you how mainstream this drink already was by the 1700s. Fast forward to the 1870s, and we meet the man most people credit as the father of commercial root beer, a Philadelphia pharmacist named Charles Elmer Hires. Here's the story, and it's a genuinely charming one. In 1875, Hires and his new wife were honeymooning at a farmhouse in New Jersey. The innkeeper's wife served them a homemade herbal tea, a mix of sassafras bark, wintergreen, sarsaparilla root, hops, juniper berries, and a few other roots. And Hires was hooked. He begged her for the recipe, brought it back to Philadelphia, and got to work. Being a pharmacist, he didn't just copy it, he refined it. He partnered with local chemistry professors to turn the recipe into a shelf-stable powder that anyone could mix with water, sugar, and yeast at home. A single 25-cent packet could make 5 gallons of the stuff. But there was a problem. Hires was a devout Quaker and a strict teetotaler, someone completely opposed to alcohol, and he originally wanted to market this drink as root tea. Wholesome, gentle, exactly the kind of name that would make hard-working Pennsylvania coal miners run in the other direction. So, according to the story, a friend, a minister, no less, told him bluntly, "Miners will never drink something called tea. but they will absolutely drink something called beer. Hires took the advice. He rebranded his temperance drink, his anti-alcohol health tonic, as root beer, deliberately borrowing the language of the very thing he was trying to replace. It's one of the most brilliant and most ironic marketing pivots in beverage history. Hires debuted his root beer at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition in 1876, and it exploded. By the 1890s, it was sold nationwide, and Hires became one of the very first companies to buy a full-page color advertisement in a national magazine at a time when Coca-Cola was still barely known outside of Atlanta. Root beer's next big growth spurt came from an unlikely source: prohibition. When alcohol became illegal across the United States in the 1920s, Americans still wanted something with body, foam, and flavor to reach for. Root beer, sweet, brown, carbonated, and completely legal, filled that gap perfectly. Brands that had launched decades earlier, like Barks, which started in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1898, saw their popularity surge during this era. And then, in 1919, a man named Roy Allen opened a root beer stand in Lodi, California. His big innovation wasn't the recipe, it was the presentation. He served his root beer in mugs that had been chilled to near freezing, so the drink arrived ice-cold with a satisfying frost on the glass. That stand eventually grew into a brand you've definitely heard of, A&W. The A and W stand for Allen and his business partner, Wright. Around this same era, the root beer float was born: root beer poured over a scoop of vanilla ice cream, creating that iconic fizzy foam on top. It became one of the defining treats of American soda fountains and diners for generations. Here's where the story takes a genuinely surprising turn. Remember that fragrant sassafras root that started this whole thing? In 1960, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration banned saffrole, the aromatic compound that gives sassafras its signature smell and flavor, from commercial food and drink production. Lab tests on animals showed that high doses of saffrole were linked to liver damage and cancer. That means that virtually every root beer sold in stores today, the one in your fridge right now, doesn't actually contain real sassafras. It's flavored with artificial sassafras substitutes, or occasionally a saffrole-free sassafras extract engineered specifically to dodge the ban. The drink that started as literal medicine is now legally not allowed to contain its own original main ingredient. Which, if you think about it, is a wonderfully strange full-circle moment.